Manny Faces is an award-winning journalist and speaker and cultural strategist, helping people, organizations, and causes remix how they innovate, educate, and uplift by unlocking the often overlooked and misunderstood lessons that can be found in hip hop culture. He is author of Hip Hop Can Save America, Inspiration for the Nation from a Culture of Innovation, showcasing real-world ways hip hop drives positive change. With 25 plus years experience in journalism, media, and advocacy, Manny speaks at events worldwide, delivering work that inspires leaders, educators, and change makers to reimagine what's possible through culture, creativity, and collaboration. I don't know anything about hip hop, but I know a lot about collaboration, culture, and creativity. And so I am here to learn right along with you how hip hop has changed the culture and can continue to have positive impact in our go forward plans. Please welcome Manny Faces. Hi, today we have Manny Faces with us, and the first thing I'm going to ask is tell me where you got the name.
And thank you for spending some time with me today. My government name is clearly not Manny Faces. It's actually Bobby Elbows. I'm just kidding. That's ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous joke. Thank you for laughing. So it's actually it was a stage name. So for a while I did music and I did production and I was doing some lyricism, and so I had names that I was going by. And this one was, I think maybe like third or fourth iteration of name. We change names sometimes, but this is the one that stuck. And that's sort of a play on, there was a He-Man character from the He-Man cartoon series. And his name was Man E Faces. And he had a spinning head. It was a weird thing because, kids' cartoons, but he had a spinning head, and he was a man and his head would spin and he was a robot and his head would spin and he'd be a monster. And so he had sort of these many faces, Manny Faces. And so I just kind of, I don't want a trademark violation. So it just so happened that it made sense to me that Manny being a name would be sort of the updated version of all that. So
Wonderful. And
yeah.
that's probably what drew me because I'm a wordsmith and I was like, I know that's a play on words, but
Yep.
it's kind of like tattoos. What does that mean to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely meaning there. And as a wordsmith myself, a writer and a journalist and a rap artist at one point, and it's very cool that it had those connotations. So yeah.
Good. So you have a unique intersection. I see your book on the shelf behind you, Hip Hop Can Save America.
Yep.
And saving America seems like a really good idea about now. And so and so what I'm wondering, and I know nothing about hip hop, I'm old, I'm white, I just don't. But neither does probably some of my audience. And so
Mhm.
I really learn and grow and expand from these conversations. I want you to tell me everything I don't know in the way that you do and help me understand what what that has meant to get to this place in our history and what that can mean going forward for
Yeah,
resilience.
absolutely. Yeah.
Fabulous.
So yeah, I mean, hip hop is a very vast subject, and a
Yes.
lot of folks, I think, from the general public who, as I say, aren't as familiar with the music and the culture associated with it, and that's the important part. So we'll circle back to the cultural part. A lot of people don't realize this, and they think of it as a genre of music. They may think of it as a very limited, or they may have a limited perception of that genre of music. May have a very cursory knowledge of it and think something very simplistic.
Mhm.
And all that's there. Whatever you know about hip hop, what little you know, or what little you've heard or saw or been exposed to is there. But for someone who's very not familiar with it, and even for those who are somewhat familiar with it, were familiar with it, it's been around for 50 some odd years now. You may have a perception of it. The way I like to talk about hip hop is that it is an overarching culture that was formed from these artistic elements that came together. at a certain period in time and over time, early 70s into the 80s, and then much more on a commercial level and a worldwide level in the 90s. Part of that culture exists and is built on foundational tenets. There's a saying that goes attached to hip hop, and it's peace, unity, love, and having fun. Like that's it. Like if you whatever you think about hip hop, you might not know that that's literally sort of at the core of it: peace, love, unity, and having fun. And that uh, exhibited itself, or that came to life through music primarily, but also through uh, a collection of associated art forms that were sort of evolved from prior artistic movements. So we have rap music, which was, just another way of saying words to music. We have DJing, right? These are sort of the core elements of hip hop. We have DJing, and that's just a new way of playing music through technological means. We have breaking, the dance that many people are familiar with as break dancing. That evolved from these artistic coming togethers of these folks. And then we have, of course, the graffiti writing, the visual artistic side of hip hop. Again, so if you just think rap music on the radio is hip hop, these are
No.
the other elements. Now they're not as front and central anymore. They're not, but they're absolutely alive and well. All of them in some great degree, and they've evolved in 50 years in some enormously powerful ways. The last thing, and then you can, ask me more to take me in any direction you want.
Okay.
The last element, we call these elements in hip hop. The last element is something called knowledge. It's knowledge. It's knowledge of self. It's knowledge of community. It's knowledge of existence. It's knowledge of the world. It's sort of where I like to say, and I can expand on it, but that hip hop folk tend to have a different worldview than non hip hop folk. Just see the world in a different way, and that whole that all of that ethos, that lifestyle, that way of seeing the world exhibits itself through the element of knowledge. And again, none of this might be familiar to anybody. You might be, what this guy is talking about. But I can show that all of those things and give examples. But that's the core of what hip hop is. Now, what it's become and all the other things that may be associated with it, absolutely again exist. But I need to start with the foundation. I need to start with the core, and from that, if we tap into those things, those elements and those tenets of hip hop, they're actually very beautiful, and they're very creative, and they're very much built on resilience, and they're very much built on uh, those like core principles, which are all good things.
Mhm. Right.
And so those things exist
Right.
in hip hop, specific to hip hop, and just manifest in very different ways.
Well, we see more today than I've ever seen before, which doesn't mean it didn't always happen because I know better. But what I've seen before, the way history is erased, the way cultures are erased and downplayed and demonized and so hip hop in some circles has all that attached demonization and
Mm,
and forgetfulness with it. So
yeah,
I want to go back to the basics for
sure.
that purpose to say what prompted. I know what prompted the Underground Railroad. I know what prompted. So what prompted the birth of this venue?
Yeah. So generally speaking, hip hop coalesced from again many factors before it. In the Bronx, in New York City, in South Bronx, in the early to mid 1970s. There's a whole b- interesting, beautiful, if you like it, but also like sociologically, impressive backstory to hip hop. The short version is when New York City went almost broke and started taking money away from neighborhoods in the Bronx and started turning off services and less for young people to do. After school activities were non-existent. Music programs were taken away and were closed from the schools. It was a if you're and you are old enough,
Yeah,
and I am old enough to remember the Bronx was burning,
yeah.
literally on fire, literally, buildings being torched. Some say by landlords that were trying to get insurance money. It was a war zone. There were gangs. It was a horrible place.
Mhm.
And from that, the rose that grew from the concrete there
Yeah.
was that a bunch of young people found ways eventually to take this burgeoning musical and artistic elements that were coming together in the Bronx
Mhm.
and turn them into a an alternative. This is like the mythology of early hip hop is that, well, there was a gang treaty in 1971. A great book on this, by the way. The City of Hip Hop, I think it was called. It's by Rob Swift. He's a DJ. Tells you the whole backstory of this gang treaty. And the gang treaty, lasted for some years. And it was right around the time that all this musical innovation was happening. And so you found young people taking their newfound DJing and newfound rapping and newfound dancing and graffiti writing skills and using them in place of physical conflict. There would be battles, but instead of fighting, we're dancing. It's we're out
Okay.
trying to out rap each other. The DJs are sort of clashing and having competitions. And so again, from a place where there's literally burnt out, rubble in the streets and nothing, no institutional resources, no bright future.
Mhm.
These young people, mostly Black Americans, some Hispanic Americans, a sprinkling of white folk, made something that did something.
Mhm.
And I think that, and I talk about this very often. I'll have done a TEDx talk on this by the time. Well, by the time people hear this, I'll have done it. I don't know if it'll be out. But you talk about that from this thing that they created, which now exists in every country of the world,
Right.
brings people together like nothing else. I'm a white guy from Long Island. I was engulfed with hip hop music and culture. I fully respect it from the inside out. And if you respect authentically and you bring your full self to this culture, the culture welcomes you in. It's the most inclusive thing I've seen on the planet that does that. That if you are part of this thing of ours, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah.
that you're welcomed, male,
Mhm.
female, race, color, creed, language, religion, doesn't matter. You can be part of this movement. And so that's where it came from. The short story of it, where it came from, it evolved through the years, very underground-ish,
Mhm.
but it formed as an outlet. It formed as a necessary outlet to fill a void. There were no music, no artistic resources, so they made them. Early DJs didn't have something we take for granted. Now you see a DJ with two turntables and they blend one song into the next and
Oh,
they keep the music going. Hip hoppers invented that. It didn't really exist at the time. The machinery didn't really exist.
right.
Grandmaster Flash had to reverse engineer a mixing board
Mhm.
and rewire the headphones. This is like a 17, 18-year-old kid engineering equipment because there's the things they wanted to do didn't exist. No one was teaching them these things. So from that lack of knowledge came such an immense creativity. It's truly an impressive origin story that covers so many things from ingenuity, resourcefulness, definitely resilience, a little bit of. I mean, there was a great blackout in New York City, I think 77, right? And whenever the
Mhm.
giant blackout hit, all the DJ music stores were robbed. So proliferated a new generation of DJs. So I won't say it was always,
Love and
above.
light. Yeah.
Yeah, but necessity became the mother of invention for this art form. And through the years it grew and proliferated around the world. Even the way that it did that, through taking cassette tapes at the time and recording live battles in the club of these rap crews that were trying to out rap each other and DJ and music. They would record these these battles and then they'd make cassette dubs, copies, and then they would one group hired the basically the car services that all drove around the city, basically paid them to play their tape
Uh-huh.
all the time. And so
Yeah.
anytime you took a car service, you were hearing these folks. And so it was like this guerrilla marketing, all these brilliant, ingenuity avenues emerged from this. And it was just about really, the phrase that comes up in hip hop and in black culture a lot is trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents, right?
Mhm.
And so that was it. So it was born
Right.
from necessity, born from uh, despair,
Right.
and just developed into so many things. And that's just even the beginning couple of decades. We're not even talk about where we're at now.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
When
please.
those, because you lived through that, I mean, you're much closer to it and you have answers I don't even
Sure.
probably know the questions for.
Yeah.
If when New York dropped the funding for arts and music and whatever, was that across the board or was that only in certain segmented neighborhoods?
certainly in segmented neighborhoods. It may have been,
Uh,
across the board, but certainly the Bronx
the
largely,
impact was
yeah,
felt.
as these things happen,
Yeah.
as I said recently, I said, whenever anything happens bad for people in
Mhm.
America, it's just that thing is going to happen worse for, Black and brown communities in particular,
Yeah.
who weren't, necessarily, who are already under,
Right.
resourced, underfunded, and underloved, to begin with. So it's really, it really impacted those neighborhoods bad. Like I say, they were burning down buildings just to collect the insurance money,
Right.
and therefore now you have, an entire, housing project, and no one's got a place to live, and already being kind of poor. So it was a bad time, and
Right.
it's a really interesting time. You talk, there's a lot to it if you go back and study it. Robert Moses building highways, building the Cross Bronx Expressway, splitting neighborhoods,
Yep.
so all this stuff came
Oh,
to a head in this really
got it.
really remarkable way.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so here we are again. So,
yeah,
so how has that has hip hop progressed? And tell me about the cultural part. Tell me about
yeah.
the lived
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up right outside of New York. Like I'm from Long Island, and I'm about the same age as hip hop, give or take
Hmm.
a year or so. And so, we're right there. I'm not in the city. I'm not in the mix, to all these things. But it came across my life like it did a lot of people our age. Music, music on the radio, and I started trying to get into the artistic side of it, DJing and doing some things very early on. My
Yeah.
dad was a blues and jazz connoisseur.
Uh-huh.
So I already had sort of this background. This music was always in the house, and you hear that from a lot of folks who got into to hip hop. That music was a big part of their family life. And I'm gonna just say that for years and years and years, that's just like I say most people think now. That's it. It's a music genre, and and DJing, sure, and dancing. We knew that there were other things attached to it,
Right.
and that's true. That's absolutely true. And for most people, that's what it was. For most people, that's still what it is.
Hmm.
But like I touched on earlier, when you are engulfed in it, in this, again, in these elements, certain cultural touch points emerge, certain things emerge that you're a part of that you don't always have the words for yourself when you're in the middle of it. I
Right.
talk very often about just this simple idea, and other cultures have used this, but it's very specific to hip hop in this way of when we would rap or we would perform, and particularly see this with dancers, anyone who saw breaking at the Olympics would have
Mhm.
noticed
Yes.
that this is a circle, and the
Uh-huh.
circle is purposeful in that setting. We usually tend to perform in a circle. We call it a cipher, right?
Hmm.
And that powerful connection of a cipher and a circle. Same thing with drum circles. All this stuff is elemental to humanity. That's
Hmm.
being pulled again. The great line from a pioneering rapper named Grandmaster Caz in a great documentary, which I recommend people want to get a little bit more understanding of the genre. It's called The Art of Rap, and it was
Okay.
produced by Ice-T. It came out a long time ago, out in the 2010s maybe, but great
Mhm.
documentary. And Grandmaster Caz says, hip hop didn't invent anything, but hip hop reinvented everything. And so you see that, we go back to drum circles and griots from ancient, ancient times in African, diasporic, influences. But we also have soul music and James Brown and Cab Calloway and the Last Poets and all these things coming together, and hip hop borrowing and adapting and remixing from all of these different influences. And then you have something new. But what that cipher does, when you're in a circle, and you see this now in education, a lot of educators will take their seats and they'll put it in a circle. It's the same mentality, but there's some hip hop was doing from day one because it promotes visibility and engagement and equity and a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
We didn't know all that. We just rocked in a circle. Here's another thing the cipher teaches you. When you're in a dance circle or a rap circle, the cipher, and Tony Blackman, I shout out Tony Blackman. She's a brilliant artist and author, and she's written about this. And she has a book called The Power of the Cipher, so the wisdom of the cipher. She's another resource. You're gonna hear me shout out about a bunch of people.
Keep going.
I'm always
Yeah.
giving flowers. Um, but she talks about this. But the one thing that you also get from this, and again, we didn't know this, but look
Right.
how this ties into education now. Because if you're an educator, you'll know this. In the cipher, if I'm rapping or you're and we take turns, right? But it's not like one, two, three, four, five.
Talking.
Like we
Right.
we just jump in, but
Mhm.
we don't ask permission to jump in. No one says it's your turn.
Uh-huh.
You just know. You know when to go, and as the other participant, the other community member holding the space, which I love, that there's performance taking turns, but the community's holding the space.
Mhm.
The other person knows when to go and when to not go, and let the other. We just know. It becomes a visual, just a thing, right? Nowadays, we know that as social and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so we learn these things. We just didn't know what words to put to them. And Dr. Bettina Love, who's the first person I've highlighted in the book, does a lot of work in hip hop education spaces, realizes that when you can translate these things, these cultural, touch points, these cultural things that hip hop is either invented or adapted.
Mhm.
Ooh, now you actually have some things that you can use in other venues and other
Right.
areas of life. So when
Mhm.
you say tell me about the cultural thing, it's those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's cross-cultural communication because you do have anyone from different walks of life, coming into hip hop, and they're bringing their experiences
Mhm.
and they're bringing their perspectives. And so when you hear maybe somebody talking about trials and tribulations of society from their perspective, as we hear a lot in hip hop, right? From these, again, underloved, underfunded, under resourced communities. And then you have a person who's coming in from a different perspective. They may be on a different socioeconomic platform. They may be from a different neighborhood. They may be doing okay, but
Mhm.
they're also having some of the same internal struggles. And now you have people relating to each other across. Find me
Mhm.
something else that can do that. You know what I mean? Because it's so hard for us to understand each other if we don't come from the same surroundings.
Mhm.
So that's the very brief look at the
Mhm.
cultural aspects of what hip hop brings, and sort of being in those circles. No pun, well, pun always intended.
Right.
And so that's some of the stuff that when you look at it now as a grown person who's had all these other experiences. And again, I didn't invent any of this. I'm not the first person to realize this. I just talked to all the people that have figured this out. That's why I got to say so many names. You
Uh-huh.
see that real uh, there's a real cultural and again globally cultural thing that crosses all borders and boundaries in a way that again I challenge anyone to show me something that does it better or different, more effectively. And that's the cultural thing that the way you start seeing things is with all that in mind. The last thing I'll say on this is that remember I said it didn't invent anything. It's an amalgamation. It's a coalescing, even in where it happened in the Bronx, but all, going back thousands of years.
Mhm.
That's a remix mentality, right? when
Uh-huh.
when you look at the world as anything can go with anything else,
Yes. Yeah.
we start seeing intersections like the matrix, like the green it comes
Mhm.
down, and we start seeing intersections and we start seeing possibilities of intersections where other people won't. So as I say in my talk, I say, uh, the kids in the Bronx didn't just invent dance and music. What they invented was a very revolutionary approach to collaborative problem solving,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's from this culture that a lot of this now finds itself in places that can make a difference in areas like education and science and technology and health and wellness and politics and social justice.
Mhm.
It's those cultural foundational qualities that
Mhm.
exist.
I had a historian last week tell me that history doesn't repeat itself, it it rhymes.
Mm,
And
right.
and my experience as a culture and communication leader in my career for 30 plus years
Yeah.
is that when you where women gather, particularly magic happens. But what you just
Mm.
described, what I call healing circles, other people,
Yep.
where people gather in community, there's connection. And they don't have to speak it because we have the energetic vibe where you just know when you like you just know, yeah, because you're in community now in the last 20 years, but particularly the last 15 with social media and now moving into AI,
Yeah.
we still have what we think is community with 1,000 followers or 1,500 likes, and nobody knows a shit about anybody else.
That's right.
And without that physical presence, that intuitive connection, how does that now translate? It's why hip hop has been reduced, I think, in people's minds to a music genre
Hmm.
rather than a movement of
Hmm.
freedom and liberation.
Yes, yes to all those things. Absolutely. Some would say there's debate whether that was done with some intent.
Absolutely.
Like you know,
Assimilation.
right? Was it the record labels like purposefully dumbing down? Was it the government leaning in? Was it some shadow, aspect of society saying no, these guys are getting too smart. They're spreading information because in the
Uh,
90s, and this is what people these days do lament about the music is that in
mhm,
the 90s, you'd have what we termed as conscious rap or, something that has more, KRS One coined it, well, recoined a term. I think it was originally Walt Disney, but KRS One started doing what he called edutainment, where
yeah.
he's breaking down, like, and I write about this often, I talk about it, the idea of giving information through music that you're not getting in the schools. KRS One
Mhm.
had a song called You Must Learn in 1989, and it broke down the contributions of about a dozen black inventors like Lewis Latimer and Granville Woods and Dr. Charles Drew and Madam C.J. Walker and like all these brilliant black innovators that and I went to a black my school district was a black school district. We were, on Long Island, we're fairly decently funded. We didn't learn about none of these people.
Right.
But KRS One did. KRS One taught us in a song. And now we have a little bit more knowledge to fill that element of knowledge. And we were getting a lot of songs like that. And that information was spreading. And it's a longer conversation to say how with intentful, no, purposeful,
Uh,
any movements made to dumb down hip hop because it was becoming a very powerful conduit for this kind of information. But I do say that it made people at least nervous when hip hop did community very well, but when it started to do constituency, that's
yes.
that's where it was
Yeah.
crossing some lines. And
Uh-huh.
there were hip hop political conventions as late as like the early 2000s where
Oh,
they were saying we know what this is. Everyone listens to hip hop, black, white,
mhm,
East Coast, West Coast. They all kind of look up to these figures. How can we use this in a way that can advance
mhm,
some political, objectives or some social agendas in a positive way that can, as I say today, help everybody, but
uh-huh,
most importantly, those from whence hip hop came, who need, deserve, and should get it first and most.
mhm,
And those things just never could fully coalesce over the years or stay together and make
mhm,
a difference.
mhm.
Um, but it was what you're saying. It's taking the community aspect of this,
Right.
and I think that is again, I hark on it, but harp on it, but hip hop does this really well because you will find people from all walks of life, and because it's global, but it's definitely multi generational now. It's
Mhm,
a powerful force for this. But
mhm.
if we lose community,
Yeah.
then we lose that power, and yes, it gets diminished. And it's just not in people's. There are people from hip hop my age that we went through the same stuff, and I have to fight tooth and nail for them to understand that hip hop is being used today in wonderful ways in education spaces, in mental health therapy,
Yes.
as a tool. It's being used now, but
Uh,
they are under the impression that none of that exists and
right.
that it's all gone. And these are people from hip hop, from those
Mhm,
communities. So
mhm.
yeah, to your point, it's very much you know a a a a dying culture if we don't do the advocacy work necessary, not only to save it for its own sake, but for the value it brings to society. This untapped, and to many of the people listening, unexpected
Yeah.
benefits that it's providing to a
Uh,
lot of people right now.
yeah.
But that's the fight, that's the work.
So my experience of you in this conversation is that you are a historian of sorts. And in my podcast in this season, particularly, the universe has brought through Underground Railroad, the hidden history of New England, 100 years of history of women who were i- powerful, of stations that moved you know, people along to Canada, all
Yeah.
through, and they just erased it. And, if you looked at the history in New Hampshire, there was never a slave owner or a slave on the
Mm,
ground.
mm,
My
right.
ass.
Right.
Okay. All
Right.
right. And then I had somebody come through with Vietnam, a Vietnam historian who was actually
Mm,
on the ground during the Tet Offensive and
mm,
the boat people after. And we pulled the thread of resilience. And because of my audience, I'm always looking at and what can women do today? What can we
yeah,
learn from that history
yeah,
that can bring us back to connection and resilience and resistance in ways that don't cost us our lives
right,
a day, right? And
right.
staying safe because white women, especially, be still, be quiet, don't make waves.
Mm,
And that is patriarchal, supremacist privilege conditioning from birth. We
yeah,
all have that
yeah,
because we're all raised in this same soup. We don't all have the roots and the connection that you're describing in the hip hop community, born out of survival of centuries and
yeah,
generations. And
yeah,
that is a powerful tool. I had
yeah,
another historian from the Holocaust. Same kind of thing. There are always people in resistance, and there are always people making art, particularly through art, which is why it's the first thing they want to take the funding away from,
that's right.
right?
That's right.
So, how are you seeing now, 20 years after this?
Mm,
How is that history rhyming? Or what have we
mm.
learned from the origin of hip hop to how we can take the connection part of the movement and let it be more than a dying music genre
Yeah.
into something that will move people forward?
Yeah, it's and it's interesting that you bring up women. Interesting is not the word. Of course, you can bring it up, but again, a bad rap, pun intended. That hip hop gets is that it's there's a misogynistic aspect to it. How could this culture, which has been so historically, seen as negative towards women, which again these elements exist. Everything that you think about hip hop exists in there. However, as I think we've talked about for a long time, and I barely talked about the music. I talked about all these other cultural great
Right.
great things in it, but all these things exist. Um, to your overall point of I want to I want to uplift the idea of women. Black women are to me among the most resilient. You talk about resilient, right? But don't want to be the face of the fight all the time. I know this for a fact, right? And so listen, learn from black women who have gone through struggle and resistance, and as far as like I'm concerned, again, in a most powerful, most uh, admirable and noble way of staying grounded as much as anyone possibly could through humanity, and learn from those lessons, I suppose. Um, in hip hop specifically, I think probably of 80% of the names I've mentioned have been women, um, who are not misogynistic, but are of and love hip hop. So
Mhm.
Dr. Bettina Love, again, who will tell you, first thing she tells me when I interviewed her, and she's the first interview of my podcast, Hip Hop Can Save America. She laid and it laid the foundation for everything I've talked about today in my mind. And similarly, she's the first person profiled in the book. Says I'm a queer black woman, who from hip hop, but also living in America. So I have a perspective on this that like is so specific and so powerful that if you're not spending time listening to the Dr. Bettina Loves of the world,
Mhm.
you're not gonna know how to fight any fight.
Okay.
And you gotta, so I think that what hip hop does to me is it brings together all these perspectives, together. When I was younger, we listened to the people that were teaching lessons from the 5% Nation, right? The offshoot of the Muslim community.
Right.
And I didn't become a Muslim. I didn't, follow that footsteps, but I listened and I learned and I understood some of the perspectives coming from that, which I wouldn't have, necessarily come across. Although my dad was a sociologist and a college professor and distinguished professor, and so I might have come across. I knew what gentrification meant when I was 8, so I'm a different breed. Also, he was very woke before woke was a thing. He taught urban studies, so I would have picked up on some of this stuff. But my point is that you can't honestly fight for a cause that includes other people if you're not listening and bringing in their perspectives and fully understanding where they're coming from. It's the art of being an ally, doesn't rely, is more than just, simplistic or performative stuff. You got to really dig in. So when you listen to Dr. Bettina Love, you hear her mention Audre Lorde. So now you have to go read Audre Lorde. When you talk to Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings, who's in my book, who was an innovator in culturally relevant education, right? This whole like field of teaching with culture centered. And if you want to teach, young Black kids, or you're going to teach young Hispanic kids, you're going to teach young white kids, you can connect with them better if you're in tune with their culture. It seems simple, but this was not done for hundreds of years in the school system. But you learn about her, she'll mention bell hooks. Well, now you got to go read bell hooks.
Right.
So it's following the threads where you mentioned threads. So it's following the threads. And if you do that, no matter who you are, you're going to gain this multicultural, multi-world view, and then you can remix it, right, in the way that works in your field or to your community or to your circle of folks. Because, and I guess that's what I'm doing, right, to a certain degree. I'm learning all this stuff from all these folks, and then I'm trying to introduce it to audiences and folks that like, and then now just go dig, just go find the part of this that resonated with you and talk to those people, listen to those people. They're the ones that are doing the innovations. They're the ones that have had to do it, because we can't just sit back and wait for them, to solve all the problems, facing our society. That they've been fighting for a long time. And so it is part of the fight. But the fight is predicated on knowledge and perspective. And that's what I think. Maybe it's, to me, everything ties back to it, but hip hop pulled from, as a sampling producer, we would take loops from other people's music, and then we'd rap over them, right? We'd find an old James Brown lick and we'd loop it and rap over it. And then we'd combine it. We'd take something from the Crusaders and put it on top of James Brown, and then take a drum beat from, the Amen break, and we'd put that up, and we would amalgamate, we'd put all this stuff together. And then from that, something was, so I'm always looking for how we can remix thought and bring perspectives into the mix. It's getting out of our bubbles. It's doing all of that. But hip hop teaches us to do that. And that's why I think one of the lessons in the book is and all the work is not that a hip hop framework, right, to approach problems and to approach societal ills doesn't have anything to do with rhymes and beats. And it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has everything to do with it, but it doesn't have to be that. It's just giving us permission to think outside of all the boxes, right? And build better things with what we already have. And so the people that are here that like, we know how to solve this.
Yes.
We know how to solve this. Just talk to us, bring us in. So so white people with privilege, position, hey, I sit on the board of education. I know how these things work, but you have the answers. Come join it. Come come into the fold. Not exploitative,
Right.
fully, but like using, like that's the role. I say that's our role, and it's certainly, I have a bit of privilege. I say that with a tongue in cheek because I'm a grown man calling myself Manny Faces. Like that does two things. Like that I can get away.
White man.
Right, old white man. I can get away with that because you can't like use your rap name in public circles. I can get away with that. I understand that. And I want everyone to have that privilege. But also, when I walk into a space with my fellow whites and I'm like, my name is Manny Faces, they're like, well, we're not giving you any attention. You know what I mean? So it's a double-edged sword with me. But yeah, that's the role, is to say, how can I, and that's why like and hip hop is like, I think, the ultimate for that, because it's easy to say, well, I'm gonna hire a DEI consultant and do all the things.
Yes. Yeah.
But Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings says in my book, and it's a great chapter about this, even though it's education based, it's what I want everyone that you're talking about to particularly zone in on. And you can listen to it. You don't have to buy the book. You can, the interview exists on the podcast free. But she says in there, she's talking to teachers about using hip hop in a classroom as a way to connect with students, increase their engagement, increase their educational outcomes. It's proven. This is not a theory. There's research if you want research. There's case studies if you want case studies. There's books, there's papers, and there's people that'll give you the receipts. And she says in there, but we don't want people to use hip hop. We want people to be hip hop.
Mhm.
And so it's that I don't use it. I don't like to use the word like hip hop as a tool. It's hip hop as a vehicle, hip hop as a collaboration. And
Uh-huh.
so if you're thinking of all these things, how can you apply it
Yeah.
to your fight or to your efforts? And I just the answers are here.
Mhm.
The people have figured it out,
Mhm.
and we just got to connect them into the grid. They have to
Wow.
be at the table. They have to be leading the table. And I know it's great to build your own tables, and there are revolution movements, and there's again, Dr. Bettina Love writes about now about school, the school abolition movement, right? The education abolition movement, which basically says, like you said, rebuild it all. Like we're not going to reform anything. It has to be
Right.
rebuilt.
Mhm.
And so when you start learning about that, now you start learning about more tactics and more tried and true methods and the evolution of tactics. And so it's just you gotta, not people.
Mhm. You people.
These friends and brilliant innovators have to be leading or part of it, and they're not.
Mhm.
Obviously, when you have a Department of Education secretary that ran a wrestling business for 30 years, like, but even on a local level, and that's partly us. We have to get in the communities as allies or as folks that are and learn about these programs because our voices do get heard better. We do get visibility, right? That we do get a little bit of
Yeah.
that privilege carries us. So I want to go into every board of education where also there's been the other side that wants to
Mhm.
dismantle these ideas have gone in and done some damage there. So we have to go in as as members of our communities, as as white folk, as privileged folk, and say, hang on a second. I know about these brilliant programs that have been piloted that help all young people learn STEM fields better. And they
Yeah.
do it through hip hop. They do it through music, and it's so
Uh-huh.
effective. And oh my God, are we using those in this school district? And why not? I want
Yeah.
my tax dollars to go fund those programs because I could tell you who they are and I could connect them to and then everyone gets uh the rising tide and all that. But
Mhm.
everyone gets uh the benefits
Mhm.
of thousands of years of resistance and rebellion or resistance and resilience.
Yeah.
Thousands of years have coalesced into this movement, and we'll waste it if we just let it, as you say, become a dying music genre. So that's part of the work. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense and prompts so many more questions. So, so, so I hear you and I feel you as a translator. And it makes me think about, I've worked with highly functioning addicts and alcoholics for over 30 years, the ones
Mm,
who can't afford the media attention. So they come to me instead of their HR department or whatever.
okay.
So we can
Right.
solve this problem without anybody knowing.
Oh, nice.
And with that, there is um, there are people who know about hip hop because they read all the books or heard your TED talk that's soon to be,
Yep.
and so they know about it. But until you've embodied it, which is what makes it a movement, you don't know a thing. You don't know a thing until you do a thing, right?
Right. Yep.
And my experience with particularly people of privilege is that we like to know about things.
Yeah.
We like to ever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth. So we pick and choose the truths we want to hold on to that serve us,
Yeah.
and the ones that are inconvenient, we legislate away.
Fair.
Fair? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Fair. Yeah.
And in this point in time,
Some people don't like to hear that, but yeah, very fair.
no,
That's
and
it.
that's exactly what I do. I put the elephant on the table and
That's
we
it.
talk about the stink because
Yep.
that's what I was born to do.
Yep.
Okay. I
Yep.
was born to tell the secrets.
Let's go.
So there we are.
Yeah.
So with that being said, in this moment in time, how do people move from, oh, look, I'm going to learn more about it
Right.
to and I'm the one who helps white people move into from their privilege into
Yeah.
inviting those voices in.
Yeah.
But there's so much of our own damn work we have to do to clear our fear factor and our biases out to
Yeah.
get to that point. I don't know what to say. I raised children in the hip hop era, and I never liked it and I never approved of it. And I'm sure I legislated the crap out of it in the
Yeah.
household.
Mhm.
And if I had it to do over from my vantage point now, completely different, right? So
Especially now you talk to me.
Oh, especially now. Well, and that's why you are like nothing I've ever seen or had or heard. And I said to myself, you came across the feed and it was like, this is a person I need to have on because I don't know shit about it and I'm uncomfortable with it. And I know that those are the things I need to learn about the most.
Yeah.
If I'm uncomfortable, there is something missing. And so in the days of Beyonce versus Taylor Swift,
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
and hip hop is somewhere in the messy middle.
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you see as resilience reimagined from that?
Yeah, and it's a great framing, and well, more of you, like, because obviously the translator translating to the translator, you know we hope we don't lose things in translation, not a game of telephone, but we need connections like this. And so kudos to you, for taking it, for seeing something that I do. And I'm just very honored when anybody wants to give me a chance to speak about what I do. But so more of that, please. That's great. um I'll be honest, that's part of, like, my challenge, right? Is to create connections where, or create opportunities for connections where, uh, if you want to be more actually, like, say, embodied, don't just do hip hop, be hip hop. I mean, it takes some spending time with hip hop folk, right? Doing this kind of work, and we are a little bit underground. Like the people I mentioned, you know, Dr. Chris Emden, like, incredibly inspirational science teacher that's made leaps and bounds in these like intersections with hip hop. You don't know who he is, right? Dr. Ian Levy was the New York School Counselor of the Year in 2016, I think. He's in the book. He uses hip hop in mental health therapy. So he's a white guy, Dr. Ian Levy from New York. Did some rapping, right? Had some connection to hip hop culture for sure, but went through the traditional training. Went, he's a counselor. He's a I don't say, like a school counselor. So I guess that's like yeah, like school psychology, right? I don't know if it's psychology versus counseling, whatever, therapist, whatever. But he's
Sure.
a school counselor, yeah, social work. But he's that. And what he did, longer story, but eventually turned his office in the school into a recording studio, and started inviting young people we aren't very good about opening up about trauma and our deepest fears, right? As a teenager, especially in troubled, areas or troubled communities. And he says, well, they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to talk to me about it, but they might rap about it. They might write about it. And, back in the days, we used to they write an essay about how you feel, about and I'm like, yeah, screw you. I'm not telling you about anything I'm going to put on paper. But if you ask them to rap about it, they will. And if you give them this sense of trust, because here I am, I'm a white guy, I'm a school counselor, you're not going to trust me, but I'll spit a few bars for you. I'll say a couple raps with you. And so now I might not be good. He's good. He's put out an album. I might not be good. I might not be your cup of tea, young 15-year-old, but I'm giving you the respect of your cultural voice. And that opens up so much. Now, these kids, and this is a case study, it's again in the book, but they crafted they started opening up to the counselors, but also to each other. Now they're doing peer groups. Now they're making songs together, and they create a whole mixtape together about their trauma and their fears and their experiences. So if you're a therapist or in the counseling session, you need to get in touch. You need to talk to me or listen to the people, and then reach out to Dr. Ian Levy, read his papers. He's done research, papers on this. Teaches now at Rutgers. Shouts to Rutgers. Dr. Lauren Kelly, who teaches at Rutgers. Again, a lot of it is education based. Now, I focus on education. I mean, mental health therapy, I've just covered. There's a dozen people I could point you to. right? Dr. Raphael Travis, J.C. Hall, Jamila Sams, you teaching social and emotional intelligence to young people through hip hop in school settings, but also out of school settings. Civics education. Dr. Bettina Love again started an initiative that can teach young people about civic. They don't teach civics in schools anymore.
Yeah.
They don't teach, especially not in black and brown neighborhoods. They sure don't want to get that education out there. So you can't do these things in schools, and as we see now, you really can't do these things in schools.
Yeah.
But Dr. Love created a program called Hip Hop Civics Ed, and again, I can teach you anything through hip hop. I got friends at Breakbeat Code that teach computer programming through hip hop.
Okay.
Like anything you can do. So how can you get immersed in it? What is your field? What do you do? Talk to me. Reach out to me as a consultant. That's what we're trying to do is bring people that are already doing this work in these communities, because it helps you expand your reach if you're in business and you want to reach new audiences and do it authentically by understanding, coming together and learn. But it also gives you that real world experience, that real world knowledge of what this looks like. So you talk about peer groups, and let's say you're like you said, you facilitate, like I'm thinking like the AA kind of meetings, or
Okay.
or let's say you work in HR and you're in a company and you're doing those retreats where we have these peer building exercises. There's hip hop people that could do that, and they do that right now. And they'll come into your organization and you'll do a freestyle rap. Off the top of the head, things he might have said. We'll do it in front of the office. I don't know what rhymes with office, whatever. But they have these programs. They have these workshops that can come into your workforce as team building exercises. Yeah. So hire them. So it's a two-way street. My challenge is, and that's kind of the work that I'm doing now, is the theater company came to me and they're developing a musical that has hip hop elements. And so as kind of hired me as a consultant and said, listen, we don't want to get this wrong. We want to be culturally sensitive. We want to be, we don't want to be too, even Hamilton, for as great as it is, receive some backlash. They don't want to do that. They don't want to get that. So who can we connect with to make sure that we're all having conversations about how to respectfully and efficiently and effectively, bring the ideas that they're trying to bring to life through hip hop. And so part of that is what I do. And part of that is on the segment of the population that says, I do want to learn more. And then when someone says, oh, well, hip hop, not hip hop. That's crazy. No, you can't, you gotta get, that's the first, the first step to acceptance, right? Is to get that out of your head. And that's part of the work. It's hard. There's a lot of factors and forces at play that make the message that I'm giving today like impossible to hear. You won't hear it. You're not going to hear it in media. You're not going to hear it in most hip hop media, even, and you're not going to hear it from from people that already have a lane of how to make the world a better place. They have their lane. So it's not new. Like I said, it's very established, but no one knows about it.
Just unheard of.
It's unheard of. Yeah, it's untapped and it's not realized. So again, that's my work. So the more people can hire and support and do all the things, and I am working on some ways to, because I'm just one guy, and I love my role, because as I tell most of the people that I interview, the same thing you're doing is like, we don't have the time to market ourselves. I'm doing the work. Right. Dr. Ian Levy, he's teaching other counselors at Rutgers now. Like he's right now he's in school. He doesn't have time to like do a podcast. He does them, but
Sure.
So we have to amplify again. So if that's your field, if you're in, how many people I have to reach out to and say, hey, I wrote a book called Hip Hop Can Save America. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to touch that right now in the media. Like, they're like, I don't know if I want to.
Oh yeah. So,
or they don't understand what the hell I could be talking about. And so it presents the problem.
So I was going to ask your permission to actually use that as the title for this podcast when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that's okay, because it'll be Hip Hop Can Save America and your name on the thumbnail. But I immediately thought, that's going to call the trolls in for sure. Well, I guess it's time.
I do get the trolls.
Yeah.
And they come from weird places. It's but and the subtitle of the book, it doesn't say solutions for the nation. It doesn't say, this ain't for white people. It doesn't say, we're gonna wrap ourselves out of this problem. No, it says inspiration for the nation from a culture of innovation.
Oh, I love it.
And so that's it. It's just ideas. It's inspiring. We're trying to inspire thought and inspire ideas from people that are doing innovative, culture shifting, life saving work. Like if we're saved, so my plea at the end of it all is if it's possible that using hip hop in mental health settings for young people, and again, particularly from communities that are typically associated with hip hop, but across the board, this stuff works.
Yeah.
These are not, this is not a, people, that'll be great in the black schools, but that's not going to help us here in Iowa. But like, yeah, it will. Of course, first of all, your kids listen to hip hop too. You don't think your kids listen to rap, get out of here. But it's making the connection. Again, it doesn't have anything to do specifically.
Right.
It's just saying, I'm going to meet you where you are in a way that is authentic and has to be authentic. And so when you do that, you just open up so many doors. So I say that if I'm right, if what Dr. Ian Levy and Dr. Raphael Travis, who wrote a book called The Healing Power of Hip Hop, like this is, not new, but if I'm right, it's not being done. So we're leaving lives on the table.
Yeah.
So please, spend a little time digging in, no matter what your field. Literally, no matter what your field. There's a hip hop and architecture camp in Detroit. So you want to get young people into architecture. They have a camp that teaches you that through hip hop. Like anything, financial literacy, civics, women's history. Like, if you want to, like, whatever you want to do, there's a hip hop angle to it. And if I'm right, and it can uplift one person that isn't going to get it from any other place, then what are we doing? And then it has to be a part of the conversation, with educators, parents, community members, community leaders, politicians, business leaders, clergy, municipalities, everybody, because it's not. And so it's a very it's a big opportunity to do some of this work.
You have to meet people where they are. And I appreciate so much that you were willing to come on and meet an old white woman where we are
Yeah.
and speak to our audience. You're a light in the dark. I can't wait to hear your TED Talk and just let us know how we can support. But I saw as you're talking, you have to know your audience and you have to meet people where you are for healing to occur.
Yeah.
And the healing that needs to occur is at every level. At every level. This reimagined is a remix. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by what I learned today of the connections. I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate that appreciation, and I thank you, and I thank your audience for spending some time with me. And anytime we can provide more information, more insight, and more examples. I got a ton of them. So
How do people find you? How do people find you to work with you or to learn
yeah,
more?
absolutely. MannyFaces.com. Manny spelled MANNY, faces like faces, .com, and or the ecosystem, my media, ecosystem is hiphopcansaveamerica.com. So either place you could find me and the work. I have a newsletter, I have a Substack, which puts out a lot of this kind of information. You can dig back through that. I list upcoming interdisciplinary events, so a lot of them are hip hop academic conferences. So, I'll be in Charlotte, in October, keynoting at UNC Charlotte, a hip hop symposium. I'll be at Howard University in November. So those kind of events I get, not the ones I list them all, whether I'm going to be there or not. But those kind of events, because they give you a chance, especially if you're an educator or you're in the particular field, but it just gives you an idea of, hey, maybe I could tap in. Maybe this is on a webinar and I can just tap in a little bit and learn a little bit more about these intersections. So the newsletter's there. I generally do a live stream show. The podcast archives are there. And I have a Discord channel, but whatever. You can find us there, mannyfaces.com and or hiphopcansaveamerica.com. And either place you can get the book as well. If you buy it from me, as opposed to the publisher or Amazon, I send you a cute little gift that comes with it, and I'll sign it and do all that stuff. So,
Fabulous.
Gotcha.
Thank you for your time.